Mark Anthony Douglas. Give him a round of applause, please.
Nakaka-pressure ang
Today we'll be talking about the speaking examination in the IELTS examination. So first things first, I'd like to run through the 4 criteria of the speaking examination. In assessing your speaking answers, there are 4 different criteria. Number 1 is fluency and coherence. Second is lexical resource. Third is grammatical range and accuracy. And then fourth is pronunciation. I will be speaking about all these criteria in a different video. I will discuss that one by one. Now, generally speaking, you just have to understand that you have to make sure you hit very good marks in the 4 different criteria, because each criteria comprises 25% of your total score. So you have to make sure you gather in very good markings in all the 4. Now, the speaking examination, as I've mentioned in my previous video, usually takes around a day or on the same day or days before or after the written examination day. It's a one-on-one recorded examination, and it's the shortest examination in your IELTS exam. Among the 4 components, this one only lasts around 10 to 15 minutes. It's the shortest examination but the longest 15 minutes of your life, because starting today you will be preparing for it. Now, there are 3 tasks to be completed in the speaking exam. Task 1 is the warm-up round, task 2 is the monologue, and then task 3 is the argumentative part. We'll talk about that in details as we go along in our discussion for today. But first, let's talk about the do's and don'ts in the speaking examination. Number 1, do think in English. I always say this to my students, that you have, in order to prepare yourself in the speaking exam, you have to program your mind to be speaking in English at all times. There are many people who speak 3 or 4 languages, and it's highly important to train your brain to switch to one particular language to another. That is why, in training your brain, you always have to think in English. I think more than that, you have to do everything else in English. Drink English. Watch English. Read English. Talk in English. Run in English. Jog in English. Dance in English. Eat in English. And almost everything you do in your life, starting now that you're preparing for the IELTS examination, you should be doing practically everything that you ought to do in a day-to-day basis. Do that in English. But more importantly, think in English so that it would be easy for you to translate your ideas from your lingua franca to English. Now, second point is always speak clearly. The IELTS examination does not give you a merit or an additional point if you sound British. You don't have to fake an accent. You also do not need to sound American or Australian. You just have to speak in English. The clearer it is, and the more neutral your accent is, that is better, and that is what they need in the IELTS examination, so they can fully grasp the idea of what you're talking about. Many people would say that you're not supposed to make use of actually, these are what we call fillers. And personally, in my childhood education, I've been taught that in a speech, you're not supposed to be having those verbal fillers. But in the speaking examination, in order for you to sound as natural as possible and as more conversational, then it is important that you have to have healthy fillers. I, I personally divided it into two. There are healthy fillers and there are habitual fillers. You just have to do away from the habitual fillers. Fillers that you use and you overuse just because you don't know what else to say. Generally speaking, you make use of fillers in order for you to buy some time and to think of what else to say, or in order for you to buy some time to organize your train of thoughts. But habitual fillers, on one hand, are utterances you deliver just in order for you to, or I mean, it's just out of habit. You're thinking, and yet at the same time, it's just a habit that you say it. And in most students, I noticed that habitual fillers sometimes they make use of ums more often than their words. So you really cannot get a good grasp of what they're trying to say just because it's overshadowed by too many fillers. So on the other hand, you should be using healthy fillers. Healthy fillers, on the other hand, are those fillers that would just make you sound more conversational and more natural. Just don't overdo it, keep it to a minimum, just so it would appear as if it's not a rehearsed answer. Examiners can pinpoint and distinguish if you have memorized your answers or not. More often, memorizing of answers happen with speakers of English as a foreign language. But for speakers of English as a second language, it's all about the habit of using the fillers. So just make sure you know how to use it and when to use it. All right. Next is use a wide range of vocabulary. Most people answer questions in the simplest possible way, which is fine. It's okay to do that because you would be better understood if you use words that are familiar to you. However, you have to take note this is an English examination. How would they be able to assess you in one of the criteria, which is lexical resource, if you're not able to show a range of better words to use? Alright, so you have to make sure you have a wide range of vocabulary and do not just simply copy the words used in the question. You should come up with synonyms or paraphrases on better ways to say it rather than just repeat the words used in the question. Another tip is, if you're having a hard time, offer examples to help you explain a statement. Sometimes the easiest way to define something is really to give an example. So for you not to have a hard time in looking for the technical definition of what you're trying to say or in expressing what you really want to say, you can give an example just so you can clearly be understood. And of course, it wouldn't hurt you so much if you smile during your examination. I know it's nerve-wracking. I know it's like being on a hot seat, but you have to make sure you maintain equanimity and be able to hurdle through that tough challenge of being interviewed face to face. So you just really have to flash that smile. All right? Practice. Next, let's talk about the don'ts in the examination. First is, do not sound flat. Sound interesting. Now, for most people, you may not have heard yourself in a recorded conversation, or you might not have tried recording your voice as you speak. Try doing it so you can listen to yourself whether you sound good or whether there are words needed to be emphasized that you missed, or whether you need to highlight on certain points, and just so for you to sound interesting. Sometimes as we talk and as we listen to ourselves talking, we get to realize that the manner of speech we use is really flat, and it's always different when it's already recorded. So you have to make sure that you have better intonation and you also stress on the important words. Okay? Next, do not give short, uncommunicative replies. Questions may be close-ended. It may be answerable by a yes or no. However, you don't have to stop there. You have to elaborate on it. Like when you're asked a question, what is your favorite color? And you just give a specific answer. You say, green. Yes, you answered the question, but how on earth will the assessors be able to see how well you communicate in English if you only answer with a single word? So even when it's a closed-ended question, you have to elaborate. You have to talk more about it in details, just so the examiner can see and appreciate how well you expound on topics. Next, do not worry if you make grammatical mistakes. As a teacher, I make grammatical mistakes. English is not my first language. I am a learner of English as well. So do not be very conscious with your grammar. The important thing here is you're able to convey your message across to the recipient and that it is clear. But of course, I'm not saying you have to set aside grammar, because grammar is also part of the speaking criteria. Grammatical range and accuracy. So if you miss on a particular item in grammar, or if there is a grammar slip, let it go. That's fine. It's okay, because examiners would also understand that speaking is totally different from writing, because in written answers, you can browse through it again and see whether you've committed an error in grammar. Whereas in speaking, the moment you utter it, it's already there out in the open. So if in case you do commit a mistake in grammar, you can actually take it back. You can self-correct. You can correct yourself once, but if you happen to make another mistake on that particular grammar component, and even if you corrected yourself the second time around, that would still be a mark down. All because it already would clearly show that that particular grammar component is something that you are still not so familiar, because you've been having mistakes on it. And in your speaking answer, you might have committed that same mistake twice. So you just have to make sure that when you make a grammar slip, you correct yourself as naturally as possible. You don't have to explain so much why you made that mistake. You just have to let it go. And if you commit a mistake and you committed a grammar mistake and you haven't corrected yourself, that's fine. They wouldn't be that harsh to you. They would understand, so long as the message is clear and your opinion or your thoughts are well understood. Alright? Now, do not worry if the examiner stops you. Of course, it's a time-bound examination. The allotted time for you to shine or for you to show your proficiency is around 15 minutes. So make the most of it. From the very first question, show them your best skill in speaking. Don't wait until the most difficult question is thrown at you and that's the only time you have to perform at your best. No, you only have 15 minutes of fame. So make sure to make it count.